Alright, the first step to making this shoe rack is making all the shelves. So I plan to do about 5 shelves. So far I've got 4 of them made. I'm just going to take you through the dimensions. Edge banding on the end here. Okay, this is a 1/2 inch thick by 1.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. Okay, each of these slats, okay, that are going in between are the same dimension, 12, a 1/2 inch, and 1.5 inches wide. This is just repurposing old 2x4's that I was using on a greenhouse build. So I figured I may as well just use up all these random little pieces that I have left over and make some shelving for all the shoes that are just kicking around the house right now. Alright, the banding on the face all the way down is 37 inches long. Okay, by once again 1.5 inches wide and 1.5 inches thick, or sorry, a 1/2 inch thick. Now if I flip this over, you can see the framing. Okay, these pieces on the end here are going to be identical, 36 inches long by 1.5 inches thick, all right, by 1 inch high over here. Okay, and this goes the same as this piece over here. This is 9 inches long, okay, by 1.5 inches by 1 inch. This piece in the middle, see if it's coming all the way, is 33 inches long, okay, and all the dimensions are the same, okay, 1.5 inches and 1 inch. Make sure that these pieces are identical in length, okay. Same thing with these 9-inch pieces on the end over here, okay? Because you want this thing to be as square as possible, because all these shelves are going to have to match up pretty much perfectly because they're going to be dadoed in a 2x4 frame, okay? So that's just a quick dimension of the shelves themselves, and I'm just going to take you through the process of making them. I won't bore you with a lot of the sawing. You'll be pulling out your hair watching me cut these slats, but here goes. Alright, so I just grabbed a 2x4 here in the process of measuring out my end pieces, 36 inches, but first I'm just going to see if this end cut is square, and it is, and now if it wasn't, I'll be recutting it, because with making these shelves, everything needs to be as square as possible. And 36 inches right there. Alright, so I got my 36-inch piece. Now I'm going to rip it 1 inch thick. Alright, so make sure I use my square. Measured it out to 1 inch. Okay. Measure out my fence to 1 inch. And make sure that it is 1 inch. Exactly. Now this fence will stay here for both cuts. Okay. This side and this side. Let's go. Alright, so I took the liberty of cutting the 9-inch pieces that go on the ends right here. Alright, so we've got the 36-inch pieces, alright, cut so far. And now I've done the 9-inch. And once again, I'm going to test these for square. Alright, how are they looking? Okay, this end is good. Alright, so let's have a look. Okay, that looks good. But I've noticed just by eye, line up the ends over here, that this end is way, you can even see it by eye, it's way crooked. Okay, So I'm gonna have to trim these up. And I'll show you that right now. All right, I stacked both pieces on top of each other, making sure the ends are flat. All right, let's give it a shot. All right, I pieced together the 36-inch pieces, okay, and the 9-inch pieces. I clamped them on because when I drill through here, I don't want these boards moving at all. Now I put my square up here, making sure everything is nice and true as best as I can. Remember, I don't have a joiner. This is 2x4's. There's going to be a little bit of warping, so it's not going to be absolutely perfect. At the very end, I'll end up having a jerry rig a little bit of the squareness out of them, whether it be planing or sanding. But this is the process I'm doing right now, just to do the best I can here. Just going to move the camera over here. Now I'm just going to drill a pilot hole, okay, on this end. And then I'm just going to run, I believe this is a 2.5-inch screw right through here, and make sure it's flat. I don't want this splitting, that's why I just did a pilot hole. And I'll do the same thing to the other ends. Okay, both ends are all fastened together. Now I'm just going to move it around. And finish off the other ends. All right, so I cut the 33-inch board. Okay, remember? 36, 36, 9, and 33. And this is going to be 1.5 inches wide, all right, by 1 inch thick, matching all the other pieces. Okay, so now what I did is try to find half of this board. Okay, so I just measured to 4.5 because it is a 9-inch length. And now I'm just going to drill a pilot hole. So right now it's time to make the top slats. Okay, so I'm going to be cutting these now. I cut scrap pieces of board 1 foot long, and now I'm just going to rip them to a 1/2 inch thick. All right, let's get to it. All right, so now that I got all the slats cut, it's time to lay them down. So I just line up the first one along with the edge. Then you could take a square if you want. Just kind of guide it along however thick you want it. Usually I do it about, every 1/2 inch. And then I pound them in with 1 1/4 inch finishing nails. And right here and there and there. And that's about it. And I'll meet you on the flip side once I got these hammered down. And once we have all the slats done on the surface, we're going to put our end caps on. Just going to line them up. This is the time where we can kind of tell whether or not we got all our measurements right. All right, so we got the end caps on. Now it's time to put the faceplate on. All right, so all the shelves are completed. They look pretty good. I'm satisfied with them. They just need a little bit of tweaks here and there. This is when all your chickens come home to roost with all your measurements and making sure everything's square. you'll see what problems I'm having right now, which is perfect. Okay, so what I've been doing here is trying to square up one side, okay, and one end. So then we'll be able to see on this side, okay, and this side, what isn't perfect. Because you'll see over here that this one shelf is longer, okay? And you can see why, you can see on this end, it seems pretty flush. That means it wasn't square, okay? So I'm gonna have to trim this somehow with a table saw, sand, maybe even replace a board or two. Who knows? We'll see what happens, okay? Because when we put the stand together, okay, so we have the legs, cut the dados in, we have to cut the dados to the widest shelf. As a result of that, the rest of these shelves will be probably, it looks like about 1/8 of an inch gap to the end of the dado, and that'll look like crap. So we have to do something about that. And you also see on the side over here, this bottom shelf, okay, it's a little bit deeper than all the rest here. So there's going to be a gap in the dado as well, okay? Sure, you could put that part of the shelf to the back of the wall. Nobody will really notice it, but I will, you know. I'm just trying to learn how to be a better carpenter. And this is one of the ways that I got to learn, right? And let's see here. Oh, look at that. That top shelf is kind of in the same boat, which is fine. One of two things I can do. You know, I could either just plane it with a hand planer, sand it, table saw, or just remove this whole piece. All right, and replace it with possibly a thinner one. Okay, so that's probably the most likely option, other than just ramming this through a table saw and hoping for the best and destroying a whole side. So I think that's the option. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think it'll take much jury rigging at all. So I'm pretty stoked about this. One other quick thing I just want to address as well is no matter how much you're going to be trying to get this to be as straight as possible, this will move, okay? This hasn't been properly dried either, okay? So now I'm going to be moving this, okay, into the house with a certain humidity level, okay? So it might be more or less than what this is currently, okay? Now I bought this at a lumber yard that's kind of semi-open. It's kind of a garage door that's open. It's better than outside, okay? I'll just show you what I mean here. If you've ever seen my video of the canvas frame video, right? Now, before I dried out that lumber, I had huge movement on the wall, okay? It was perfect when I made it, but then it moved and I'm like wondering what happened. But then I bought this moisture meter, okay? Now, some people will just laugh and scoff at me, or the batteries might be dead in this thing, but it says 12% humidity, okay? Now, if my house is 8, or say 15, or even 20, we're gonna have huge movement, okay? But I'm lucky, because I think that's what the house is generally at, so I shouldn't have much movement, okay? But something to consider, okay? Like I had to dry mine in the house. No, I probably didn't have to dry it that long, but it ended up being like 6 months. Then I made the canvas frames and they were perfect and they still haven't moved to this day. But, you know, just something to address. We have to also take in consideration, it is a shelf for shoes, okay? It doesn't have to be really fancy. Yeah, sure, it's not gonna go in the hospital home lottery show home as a centerpiece. It is 2x4's and leftover 2x4's at that. But if I can't build this shelf and mail it, then I'm not going to have any luck with any other furniture in the future. So give it a go, give it a shot. Repurpose lumber. This probably would have went to like firewood or some other little project, or just collect space in the garage. So the next stage is putting up the framing, the legs of the project. All right, this is the next day, and today we're going to be doing some dados. We're going to be cutting
dados from these boards that I ripped down to 2.5 inches wide and 1.5 inches. Okay, these are 5 feet long right now. And I found the major problem with working with any wood, but particularly 2x4s, is that the straightness. Okay, now these boards were cupped and bowed on the edges, so I wanted to make sure my edges were as flat as possible. So the first thing that I did do is made sure that I took my planer, okay, and planed down a flat surface as best I could, okay, before I run it through the table saw, because as soon as you run a piece through a table saw, so the blade's going to be on this side, it's going to match whatever inconsistencies are on the fence side. Okay, just like a thickness planer, right? It doesn't solve your problem of squareness. It's going to get it nice and flat and smooth, right? But it's not going to get true, okay? So running it through your square, you can pick out all the issues that there is, right? Because say if this side was a little bit high, all right, you can just take your little planer and just take a little bit off this side, okay? Same thing with over here. You can take off whatever you want. These boards are not perfect by no means, but I think they'll do the trick for now. All right, once the boards were all planed down and ran through the table saw, and as square as I could get them, I made sure that I took both these boards, stacked them on top of each other, and ran them through the compound miter saw just to make sure that they were square and even. I did it for the other side as well. I also took the liberty of marking out where the dados are going to go. I don't know if you can see it. It's more or less where my hand is. I'm just going to block out a little bit of the light here so you can see these faint little marks here. I didn't want to run it through with a pencil, okay? I'll lose 1/8 of an inch off that. So I butted both the boards up and I just scored it. You can score it with a knife, utility knife, or whatever you want. And I just ran it through here. Made sure my square was handy and just ran it through. And I find that's the best technique right there. You don't want to be 1/8 of an inch out. So I think that was pretty good. All right, so I'm going to take these on the table saw and give her a go. All right, so here's the finished dado. Forgot to mention that the dado is 1.5 inches thick, okay? And it goes down 1/2 inch. All right. Now let's see how it fit on the piece. So we just want the dado just thick enough to cover this front banding, or the side banding, I should say. And let's see if we can wedge it in there. And it seems okay. I'm happy with that. Now let's see if we can do this for all the other dados coming up here. That's the trick, right? Hey everybody. I just thought I'd share with you my clamp monstrosity here. Man, I had to take every clamp I own, borrowed 5 from my brother-in-law. So far there's 13 Irwin clamps on this, and none of these clamps are long enough to actually just have a single clamp go across the project. So I had to kind of gang them together to create a clamp. Oh, it's sad. Man, I even got some C clamps in here. I got about 15, 16 clamps on this. And it's just the front face of it. All right, so it's just one side. All right, we haven't done this side yet. I put these legs in just to make sure it keeps everything square, right? And believe it or not, this thing's nice and square. So I took my speed square and went along and made sure that it's as square as I can get it. And it's looking surprisingly good on this side. We haven't tackled this side yet. you know, once I get everything clamped in there and ready to go, but it should be pretty good. All right, I didn't take you through the assembly of these joints. I was in the middle of a glue up, and I didn't want to muck around with all these clamps and show you because it was just a mess. I wanted to make sure that this is square. But one thing I did do when I did these dados is cut them a little small. You know, you can always cut and not add, you know, so I made sure that if it didn't fit and it was just a little too snug, I would just run it through the table saw, just a smidgen, okay? I did that all the way along here, you know, so probably half the dados, they needed to be just shaved, but I didn't want any gaps. You know, that was my enemy right there. Granted, I want to be covering the face of this. Okay, so I'm going to be putting down this banding over top of the dados, but still, I just didn't want any gaps. I wanted to make sure that all that glue was in there, it was sturdy. But one thing I am wondering if I should do is just go with the finishing nail right in there, because this glue is like super tough. It's this Pro Bond, okay? It's stainable. Or go with the brass screw. I went with the brass screw before, but you got this screw in this side, right? And I want to stain this. You know, it's 2x4's, but still I want to stain it. You know, the screws don't look that good. Even though it's brass, hard to say. I'm kind of stuck in the middle here, but this would definitely give it some security. All right, so I opted to go with a single screw. I didn't trust that brad nail. That's going to do nothing. Who knows what this shelf is going to be used for down the road? You never know, right? You might have books on it, like a lot of heavy books or equipment. For now, it's going to be shoes, you know what I mean? But still, you never know down the road. And if I want to put some kind of banding along the side here to cover that screw, so be it, right? But this is a kind of a nice brass screw. So I just ran a pilot hole through. All right. And to countersink it, because I don't have anything like a proper countersink, just a drill bit. And as I rip everything to shreds here, right? Nothing a sandy won't fix. And just kind of manually put it in there. So I think this is going to hold up real nice. I'm happy with the look, more or less. But the brass screws are a nice touch. All right, just to give you an update of where I'm at so far. Stand is all glued together, screwed together, all right? And it's looking pretty darn sturdy. I'm pretty happy with it. Since you've seen it last, I ran this piece of wood, okay, between the two legs, which is 8 inches long and 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. I also put some banding on the front. This is just banding from this piece of wood. So each piece of 2x4 I ripped down, kept this banding because it's 5 feet long, exactly the dimensions of this leg. So I kept the banding and then I glued it, clamped it, and nailed it with some finishing nails just to kind of clean things up a little bit. All right. I also want to show you the spacing of the shelves. I never showed you the spacing of the shelves yet. The spacing of the shelves are 9 inches. So there's going to be 3 shelves, okay, that are 9 inches. All right. And then the bottom shelf is 17 inches because the average winter boot, rubber boot is around 16 inches in height. So I made that to 17 inches. The spacing on the ground, so from the bottom shelf to the ground is 4 inches. So if you want to sweep or mop underneath that, perfect. And then the spacing on the top is 3.5 inches. Okay. Okay, so I went ahead and I stained the project. I put 2 coats of finish on here. I'm just going to show you what I put on here. So I got some varnish. Okay, this is Colonial Maple from Minwax. Okay, so I put 2 coats of that on. When I applied this, I didn't wipe it off with both coats. Normally, with a project, when I brush it on, I'll wipe it off. But I like the color that I was getting and the deep penetration from this when I didn't wipe it off, okay? So it dried evenly, the first coat, and then the second coat I put on, did the bottom and the top, and I didn't wipe it off again. And there's a little bit of sheen going on here, but it's not tacky at all, so it's perfect. And then what I'm going to do for weather resistance is this Minwax product here that I'm getting some reflection from the light here. It's spar urethane. Okay, I've used this before and it really cleans up well if it gets wet or dirty. Now I'll be putting a clear satin finish on it just for weather resistance. So this is the indoor-outdoor helmsman version. Okay, so I'm going to be applying this real quick. I'll spare you with me painting this on here. Same thing with the varnish. I didn't want to take you through that process because it's a pain in the butt. But yeah, I'm just going to put the first coat on, top and bottom, and I'll get back to you after that. Alright, so I got the first coat of the spar urethane on this project, and so far so good. I like the way it dries. It dries pretty quickly. The top shelf is dried pretty good. I'll show you here. I'll give you a close-up. Okay, the top shelf is a lot drier than all the rest. I had to take my daughter to bow practice, but it is solid. And this is the first coat. Now, I don't know if I can actually show you. You can see some sheen differences and streaking. Okay. Now, what the pros do is they sand this now. Okay. Now, if you have like a really fine project, solid maple, solid oak, something to that effect, right? Then they take like a 220, 300 grit, and they sand this all off, and then they apply the second coat. Okay. Now, I'm not going to be worrying about that, right? This is 2x4's. Look at this sand job. You can still see the frickin' saw marks. Like really, you know, this is pathetic. But I had to get this on the go here. We're heading to Jasper here in a couple days, and this had to get done quick. And it's for shoes. But that's no excuse. But over here too, look at this. Look at these saw marks. Man, there's burn marks on the bottom of this project. Yeah, so here's the first coat. I'm happy with it. I just want something that's going to have a little bit of longevity in the long run. So I think we'll call this project done. Tomorrow I'll apply the second coat after work and it'll be finished. So I just want to congratulate those of you who actually bared through this video. It's nearing 30 minutes in length here. So good on you. Give yourselves a pat on the back at least. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.